we recommend Poland the following: to adopt a comprehensive strategy aimed at preventing and eliminating all forms of violence against women.
To amend the criminal code to clearly criminalize domestic violence and implement a comprehensive strategy to eliminate all forms of violence against women.
We therefore recommend Poland to continue its good efforts to address violence against women and domestic violence, including by increasing support for victims of domestic violence.
We recommend that Poland intensifies its actions to combat violence against women and to counter discrimination against women.
Poland continues its efforts to prevent and eliminate all forms of violence against women.
Adopt measures to protect women's rights, including through strengthening of laws against sexual violence, as well as ensuring equal participation of women in political and public affairs.
Continue its efforts to eliminate violence against women, including domestic violence.
Bosnia and Herzegovina recommends Poland to harmonize its national legislation with the provisions of the Istanbul Convention and to continue to promote the participation of women in public and political life of the country.
Australia recommends Morocco amend domestic legislation to remove all forms of gender-based discrimination and protect the rights of women and children.
Belgium recommends, first, that Morocco speed up the adoption of the draft law 103/13 on violence against women, while taking into consideration the need to extend the protection provided for the women's victims of violence and to criminalize conjugal rape.
To strengthen the legal framework in place to protect women from all forms of violence and to eliminate all gender-based discrimination legislation.
Canada today recommends that Morocco first ensure that the minimum age of marriage is respected at 18, including the right given to judges under Article 20 of the Family Code.
Since the trend of all early marriages in Morocco reaches the overwhelming 99% of girls minors, including those aged 14 to 16, we urge the government to eliminate this harmful practice and raise awareness among public and parents for their effective protection.
Ireland recommends that Morocco revise the penal code and associated law for compliance with international standards, to guarantee equality between men and women, criminalise marital rape, decriminalise sexual relations outside marriage, abolish discrimination against children born outside of marriage, increase the minimum age of marriage to 18, decriminalise consensual same-sex relations and develop public awareness programmes to address stigmatisation of LGBTI persons.
And take steps to further improve the protection of women who are subject to violence, including through amending the penal code to ensure criminalisation of marital rape. 2. To take measures to counteract the trend of judicial authorizations of marriages involving minors, including through necessary amendments of the Family Code.
We recommend Morocco to revise the Family Code to prohibit polygamy and marriage of minors, as well as guaranteeing equality between men and women in inheritance matters and in the right to guardianship.
Japan recommends Tunisia to promote legislation that is in keeping with the CEDAW, including for preventing violence against women.
Canada recommends that Tunisia first repeal Article 227 of the Criminal Code, which allows the perpetrators of rape to escape prosecution if they marry their victims.
Pass comprehensive and specific violence against legislation that contains both criminal and civil provisions. To amend the Penal Code to abolish provisions allowing a perpetrator of sexual violence to escape prosecution for marrying the victim. Abolish provision allowing the prosecution and trial or execution of the sentence when the victim retracts the complaint. Explicitly criminalize marital rape.
Secondly, that it accelerate the adoption of a general law against violence against women and girls, criminalizing all forms of violence, including domestic violence and conjugal rape, and guaranteeing access to justice.
To adopt a comprehensive law on violence against women and girls that addresses the importance of consent and provides adequate protection for victims and appropriate penalties for perpetrators.
Australia recommends Bahrain immediately implement a formal moratorium on the death penalty with a view to abolishing the practice.
We recommend to commute all death sentences, declare a moratorium on executions, and move towards an abolition of the death penalty.
We recommend that Bahrain commutes all the death penalty sentences and establishes a moratorium on executions.
to reintroduce the moratorium on executions with a view to definitively abolishing the death penalty.
Immediately declare an official moratorium on executions with a view to the ratification of the second optional protocol to the ICCPR and the abolishment of the death penalty.
To promptly undertake a thorough investigation of all allegations of torture and ill treatment, including in the case of the 3 persons executed in January of this year, and to bring the presumed perpetrators to justice.
Suspend without delay executions and declare a moratorium on application of the death penalty as a first step towards abolition.
To impose an official moratorium on the death penalty and to replace the death penalty with a sentence that is fair, proportionate and respects international human rights standards.
Peru would recommend that South Africa consider extending the policy of affirmative action to mestizo populations, mixed populations, and consider priority attention be given to indigenous peoples, particularly concerning language, education and the distribution of land.
To provide adequate financial resources to the Human Rights Commission to enable it to carry its work.
Build on the progress made to provide adequate housing through such programs as the Integrated Human Settlement Grant and Urban Settlement Development Grant.
We'd like to make the following recommendations to South Africa. 1. That it facilitate the visit of the Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and intolerance.
Welcome the release of the draft action plan to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance. We recommend South Africa to expedite the legislative process in this regard.
South Africa recommends that India first enact the Prevention of Torture Bill and ratify the Convention Against Torture.
Ratify the Convention Against Torture and the Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. Take appropriate measures to avoid the excessive use of force by security officers.
To strengthen efforts to guarantee freedom of religion and belief, especially by retracting so-called anti-conversion laws.
Ratify the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Abolish anti-conversion laws and grant access to justice to victims of religious violence and discrimination.
Indian government should take visible policy and other measures to ensure freedom of religion and belief and address alarming trend of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance, including mob violence committed, incited and advocated by right-wing parties and affiliated extremist organizations against minorities, particularly Muslims, Christians, Sikhs and Dalits.
The Netherlands also recommends that India take all necessary measures to protect the right of persons belonging to religious minorities and repeal laws which restrict religious conversion.
To enact a law for the protection of human rights defenders.
We recommend that India, 1. Ratify the Convention Against Torture, 2. Ensure that laws are fully and consistently enforced to provide adequate protections for members of religious minorities, scheduled castes, tribes, and other vulnerable populations.
Mozambique would like India to consider the following recommendations. 1. Ratification of the CAT.
Sweden recommends the government of India, 1. to ratify the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment.
Guarantee freedom of expression, association and peaceful assembly for all individuals and promote meaningful dialogue that embraces and allows freely organized advocacy of diverging views of civil society.
To ratify the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. I thank you.